We are now moving on to study unit 2. So we're now moving on to study unit 2. And study unit 2 introduces us to enterprise risk management. So study unit 2 introduces us to enterprise risk management. So the main idea behind enterprise risk management is that it goes back to what we say is the goal of the firm. The goal of the firm is to maximize shareholders' wealth. So how do we maximize our shareholders' wealth? We have seen that historically or traditionally, risk management was seen as a department that operated in silo and separately, where it was not basically coordinating with other departments as well. And now, in a modern environment, and because of the ever-changing environment in which organizations work in, remember we said the key to success for a particular organization is to ensure that it is agile enough to be able to take advantage of those opportunities so that it's able to create a competitive advantage. And if they create a competitive advantage, this lays the foundation for the organization to be able to maximize shareholders' wealth. So with that in mind, it basically means that the modern risk management is where risk management is seen as working hand in hand with other departments or functions of the organization. And that way, it means that the more the risk management departments work hand in hand with other organizations or other departments of the organization, it means that it's going to be in a position where the whole organization is going to be able to be agile enough to actually come out of risk situations quicker than having the risk department operating in silo, mainly because if they are continuously working hand in hand, it basically means that, remember I say, when you look at the job of the risk manager, we said the job of the risk manager is to identify the risks, quantify the risks, present the different risk exposures to the board and the top management. After presenting the risk exposures to the board and top management, they now make decisions to say, these are the different risks that we are prepared to be exposed to, and these are the risks that would rather transfer to, for example, through commercial insurance. Now, if certain risks, the organization say, we are not prepared to venture into these different, these type of risk exposures as well, in operations as well. It basically means that the job of the risk manager is also do the monitoring and risks and review as well to ensure that the different functions of the organizations are going to be operating within the different the desired risk range that has been set forth by the board of directors and top management. So risk management is basically an ongoing function within an organization. Now, for the risk management department, for it to be able to ensure that it monitors and reviews the different risk exposures of the organization, that's why we say it means that the risk management function cannot be seen to be working in silo. It has to be working in close coordination with other different functions of the organization. So this is where we look at when you look at what enterprise risk management. Now you also see that in study unit 2, this is where we're also going to say, further on, apart from mitigating the possible risk exposures that the organization is going to be facing as well, it's not enough to just mitigate those risk exposures. We have to go beyond mitigating the risk exposures by ensuring that as an organization, you are in a position where you're also able to identify opportunities coming out of these different risk exposures and exploit those opportunities so that you're able to create a competitive advantage. And the more you're able to create a competitive advantage, the more you're able to maximize shareholders' wealth in the long run as well. So here, when you look at enterprise risk management, the lecturer says, the aim of this study unit is to give an overview of the interaction between enterprise risk management and the capital of the enterprise. So it basically means study unit 2 is actually preparing the foundation of what we are going to be expecting when we look at Study Unit 3. Because Study Unit 3, that's where we're now going to be looking at what? Understanding the capital of the enterprise. Because when you look at understanding the capital of the enterprise, remember this is where we say Study Unit 3, we're going to be saying traditionally the accounting equation says your assets is equal to equity plus liabilities. And remember we said when you look at this, we are saying that the risk exposure is basically coming from here, because this is coming from your income generating activities. So from these income generating activities, this is where we are going to be facing. So which means when you look at the accounting equation, we basically say for this risk that we're going to be financing, it's either we're going to be asking the owners of the business to ensure that we have enough capital available for these, when you look at capital budgeting, and also when you look at capital budgeting, or we can ask other entities or other external parties to contribute towards what the assets of the business. But from a risk management perspective, remember I said risk can be transferred or risk can be retained as well. So which basically means that the capital of the business from a risk management perspective, there is also risk capital that we also need to account for, because these assets that are funding through equity or liabilities, there is going to be an element of risk because they might also result in losses as well. So which means the risk capital is now going to be used to absorb these potential losses to ensure that the business is able to continue as a going concern. So this risk capital is going to now depend on whether we're choosing to retain the risk or we're choosing to transfer risk. And we're going to be looking at that in detail in Study Unit 3. So which basically means that Study Unit 2 is basically introducing us to say, so how are we going to be able to ensure that during the operation of the business, we're able to identify the risk, and how are we going to ensure that we're going to be able to mitigate the effect of this risk as well? And how do we mitigate the effect of this risk? Through having sufficient risk capital available. So which means when you look at the risk management department, for us to be able to mitigate these risks and identify opportunity that can come out of this as well, we're basically saying that the risk management department cannot work in silo, it has to work hand in hand with other departments. And if it's going to be working hand in hand with other departments, it basically means that this is what we're going to be looking at when you look at what enterprise risk management. So on Unit 2.1, we look at the business case of strategic risk management. And under this, we look at the article which looks at wicked problems, turning strategic management upside down. And under self-assessment, where we look at the learning outcomes that we need to take note of, here they say, discuss the weaknesses of the conventional doctrines of strategic management, define wicked problems, do a comparison of the characteristics between conventional and wicked problems, discuss the categories of wicked problems, and when does strategic misalignment happen. And we're going to be looking at that when we look at the article for Unit 2.1. So when you go on to the article for Unit 2.1, which looks at wicked problems, turning strategic management upside down, they say, under introduction, they say, I'll start from the beginning of the paragraph. Most decision makers know well the challenges of environmental complexity. While the underlying causes are many, they include such factors as globalization of trade and finance, the digital revolution and the internet, the explosion of education and income disparities. This new reality contains new forms of disorder, massive uncertainties and volatilities, unpredictable consequences, and severe disruptions of the corporate playing field. So how does society in general and strategic decision makers in the firm universities or public bureaucracies in particular address these very complex management discontinuities. Well, the conventional doctrines of strategic management have in their premise the reduction and control of disequilibria, unknowns, and random events. They focus on various frameworks where the problems are known and understood. The means and end relationships are complicated but deterministic. Knowledge and expertise can be applied by using formal mathematical models and conventional tools of linear analysis. So the metrics of efficiency and effectiveness can address fluctuations and deviance from expected norms. So in the past decades, corporate strategists, drawing on the huge academic literature, new models in the corporate space, military strategists, and the consulting world have made great advances to address environmental uncertainty, knowledge complexity, and industry oscillations. So theories of creative destruction as the inevitable process of market economies give rise to new theories of disruptive technologies. More slow and constant innovation affect all sectors, even a once stayed insular industry like automobiles. So these issues of knowledge complexity and problem uncertainties raise many challenges for corporate decision makers. So do managers understand the appropriate tools to address the unconventional problems, or are they tied to conventional thinking, assumptions, and approaches to strategic decision making? In their discourse, Lafley and Martin describe how to approach the dilemma. One, be clear about what business to operate in. And two, where to operate. Three, how to win. And four, what competencies are needed to consistently outperform the competition. So, what we're saying is, when you look at the business environment 50 years ago, or say 100 years ago as well, the environment in which businesses operate, it wasn't faced with a large bombardment of information compared to the environment that businesses are operating in now. Traditionally, like what I said in the previous study unit, you will see that a typical example of a traditional company, a traditional entity, is where you look at those sole proprietorship businesses that are run by, let's say, for example, someone is running their own store in the rural area. So you'll find that in that area, the only thing that they are basically worrying about is basically the customers. The competition is basically those people that are basically having other stores in that particular environment, and there's not so many factors that they have to take into account when it comes to their operations. But now, because of globalization and because of the use of the internet as well, customers are having so many options on exactly where to buy. They are also having more access to information because, for example, previously, because of lack of information, a person would buy something or a particular product, they can be able to sell it in a particular environment or particular area, knowing very well that the customers don't know better when it comes to the pricing of that particular product. So which means they can be able to charge this particular product at a higher price as well. But now, because of if people are able to access more information, especially when you look at the issue of the internet as well, it basically means that someone can be able to make a decision to say, why am I buying this product at this particular price when I know that this person is actually able to buy this product at a particular price because it's what? There's somewhere else where they're able to buy this particular product at a lower price as well. So which basically means that when it comes, because of globalization, businesses are no longer having to worry about the effects basically from a regional or local perspective. There's a lot of things that they have to consider as well because customers are now having more, for example, more information. There's more information flow, which basically means that they are able to now check to see they're also having more options on exactly being able to buy from different options as well from the internet. Like what I said, they can now be able to check on Takealot. They can now be able to check, for example, on Amazon as well. So because of this, there's a lot of information that has to be processed by a particular organization before they make a particular decision as well. So what does that mean? Because information is now flowing at a faster rate and things are changing at the same time at a faster rate as well. It basically means that decisions have to be made. The organization has to be agile enough to make those decisions and adapt to this ever-changing environment in which what organizations operating as well. So because of this, basically means those historical models that have been used in making decisions, some of them, they are becoming outdated, which basically means that you can no longer now 100% rely on those historical models, mainly because the environment in which businesses are operating in is basically changing. And there are so many new elements that are being brought into this particular environment. Like what we see now, there's introduction of the artificial intelligence as well, and the advancements of the internet and faster speeds as well. And there's a lot of things that you have to take into account as well. And also issues of also, for example, automation. So which basically means that there's a lot of things that the organization has to process in their decision making. And because of this, you find that some of these models that we used in making decisions historically, they are becoming outdated, which means that the organization has to use more, has to basically be able to work around with this model as well, and being able to actually come up with something better that is able to actually what where they're able to make decisions at a faster rate. Which means on the next paragraph, they say, so the questions remain, are these tools the right strategic approaches needed for all markets, strategic problems, and firms? Where we look at tools that we use historically, for example, you look at models based on cost price leadership as a strategy, positioning of the organization, the processing when you look at the value chain, and also understanding the people and different networks as well. So you see that these models that we used historically, they are becoming outdated because the market is basically changing at a more drastic rate as well. Are there any questions before we move on? Any questions? So because of this, I say, so such media accounts typify massive inconsistencies between model assumptions, openness, competition, transparency, executive responsibility, and low risk, and the reality of decision premises a form of hypocrisy between mission goals and actual behavior. Most theories of strategic decision-making apply premises and assumptions of rational behavior and stable systems. In finance and the world of banking, actual strategic behavior differs wildly from the rational model of perfect competition, where all the variables are known, where information is free and available, and where computational strategic choices and their consequences are examined in one minute detail. So indeed, the real world of corporate finance is the exact opposite. More generally, strategic approaches to complex problems are misaligned with problems themselves and potentially make firms ill-equipped to address wicked problems with simplistic approaches. So we're going to discuss exactly what wicked problems are in the next section as well. So which basically means that we are basically saying that because of all these advancements and ever-changing environment in which organizations work in are operating as well, you will see that we're basically saying that it means that many organizations are facing wicked problems, which are basically those problems which are basically difficult to actually to solve. Reason being, there's a lot of complexity that is being involved because the environment that we're operating in is basically becoming a bit more complex, and it's also ever changing as well. And because of that, it basically means that sometimes you find that if you come up with a particular problem, even if you say, give someone a task to say, please, this is the problem that we're facing, can you please come up with a solution? if they are going to be taking, for example, 3 months or 4 months trying to come up with a particular solution, by the time that they come up with that particular solution as well, the problem that with the environment that we're operating in is that you find that in some cases, the environment would have changed as well, and that particular problem would no longer, that particular solution would no longer be relevant to the problem that is being faced as well. So here they say, in this paper, we focus on wicked problems as the environment for strategic environment management. The wicked problems cover such diverse topics as climate change, low-cost healthcare, terrorism, security, extreme income disparity in a world of trade liberalization, inner city poverty, white-collar crime, and cyber crime. So these are some of the environments in which wicked problems are likely to be encountered. So wicked problems often arise when companies are faced with the need to cope with a constant change or to face new unprecedented challenges. So the signal of wicked problems involve complexity with conflicts arising from multiple but different stakeholder views, social and attitudinal variables, varying sequential and simultaneous pressures and timelines, possible presence of ideological precocity, and lack of clarity on end-means relations. So with the different approaches to address, understand, and cope with wicked problems are needed as well. Now, when it comes to exactly what wicked problems are, we look at the section, we look at the new paradigm, wicked problems. And here they say, Retail is often credited as the author of the term wicked problems. However, Churchman used the term to guest in a guest editorial of a special issue of management science. In this, he defined wicked problems as a class of social system problems which are ill-formulated, where the formulation is confusing, where there are many clients and decision makers with conflicting values, and where the ramifications in the whole system is thoroughly confusing. Wicked problems are various antecedents, are difficult to define, and when conventional solutions are applied to them, the consequences can be undesirable. So we also look at characteristics of traditional or conventional problems. So which means we're basically saying that there are two types of problems that we've seen. Historically, we used to face what we call traditional or conventional problems. But now we are facing what we call wicked problems. So to see exactly what conventional problems are, they say the characteristics of conventional problems would be they are well-structured problems, they have norms of testing solutions with mechanical processes using numbers. There's a clear means-end pattern between the problem or goal state and future states to be reached or considered as the solution state. There's knowledge application about the problem and problem states. There's clear accuracy of means ends that govern the external world, and such conditions allow practical amounts of computation and practical search processes. So the next table basically gives us a comparison between the conventional, which is basically the traditional problems, and what we deem to be wicked problems. Are there any questions before we look at this particular table? Any questions? Now, when we look at the comparison between conventional and wicked problems, the first issue that differentiates between conventional and wicked problems is what when we look at basically the identified problem itself. They say when it comes to the problem, if it's conventional problems, they say there is a clear definition of the problem, although there is unknown solutions. So you don't know what the solution is, but everyone is in agreement that this is the problem that we're facing as an organization or as a country or as the world. But when it comes to wicked problems, there is no clear definition of the problem. So there is unknown and changing solution. So which means if it's wicked problems, not everyone is in agreement that this is the problem that has been identified. So others are saying, no, the problem is this. And others are saying, no, the problem is that as well. So which means that there is no agreement on exactly what the problem is. So this is where we look at when you look at the difference between a conventional problem and a wicked problem. Are there any questions? The next characteristics that distinguishes between conventional and wicked problems is the thought process that is involved. So they say the thought process for conventional problems is linear, and the thought process for wicked problems is a complex system. So what we're saying is that when it comes to conventional problems, we are basically saying everyone is in agreement on what the problem is. And everyone is in agreement to say, to come up with a solution, to get to the solution, we need to go through step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, for example, up to step number 4. And this is where how we're going to be able to arrive at a solution. If it's going to be a conventional problem. So everyone is in agreement to say, yes, this is the problem that has been identified. And based on the model that we have known and come up with historically as well, we know that if we use this particular model, we're going to say step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and step number 4. These are the steps that we need us to come up with what? With a particular solution. But now, when it comes to wicked problems, we are basically saying it's a complex system. Reason being, not everyone is in agreement that this is the problem that has been identified. So others are saying, no, this is the problem. So when it comes to the problem, when it comes to identifying the problem, others are saying this is the problem. Others are saying this is the problem, and others are saying this is the problem as well, right? Then from there, to come up with a solution, others are saying, let's follow this route. Even if they agree on the identified problem as well, others are saying, let's follow this route. And others might say, let's follow this route. And these ones will identify this particular problem as well. They can say this, or they can say that, or they can say that as well. And these ones can also say this, or they can say that, or they can say this as well. And then they can say, even when they now go on step number 3 as well, others can say, let's follow this step. Others saying, let's follow this step as well. So it's basically a complex matrix on steps that are going to be chosen to come up with a particular solution. So which means because the complex matrix of steps that can be come up with a solution as well, not everyone is going to be in agreement on exactly how do we arrive at a particular solution. Because remember, not everyone is in agreement on exactly what the steps are to arrive at a solution, and not everyone is in agreement on exactly what the identified problem is as well, which means that there is going to be different solutions that are going to be suggested by different groups as well. So because of this, we are now looking at wicked problems as well. We're basically saying that there's no agreement on exactly what the identified problem is, and at the same time, there's no agreement on exactly what the solution would be. So it basically ends up having what a complex system, which we not try to come up with a particular solution as well. Are we on the same page?
Munir, is that the explanation of the thought process?
When it comes to which one, conventional or wicked problems?
I think in the table you first highlighted that conventional problems have a clear definition, and then wicked problems don't have a clear definition. Under that, there's the thought process, whereby conventional problems have a linear thought process, whereas wicked problems do not have a straightforward thought process. So I just want to understand, so does this explanation cover the thought process, or we are just still identifying the
Yes,
characteristics of?
it covers the thought process in the sense that,
Okay.
remember, the sake of conventional problems, the thought process is linear, isn't it?
Yes.
Linear basically means that it's straight line. When something is linear, it's straight line, which means we're basically saying that everyone is in agreement that these are the steps that are going to follow, come up with a solution.
Okay.
That's when we
So
say the thought process of problems is basically linear, because everyone is in agreement to say, if we identify the problem, next step is this, next step is that, and next step is that. So which means that it's basically linear, because everyone is in agreement to say, so this is step number 2, step number 3, step number 4, step number 5. When we reach step number 5, we have now come up with a solution. But when it comes to conventional wicked problems, not everyone is in agreement on what the problem is, and not everyone is in agreement on what should be step number 2, step number 3, or even what the solution is as well. Because others are going to say, others can simply say, this is step number 1. If we go to step number 2 and step number 3, we're done with identifying the problems. But others can say, no, it's not enough to just go to step number 3. We need to go to step number 4 to identify, to now come up with the solution as well, which means that there is no agreement on it, because there's no agreement on what the problem is. There's no agreement on what the solution is as well. So because of this, and there's no agreement on how to arrive at the solution as well. So which basically means that it's basically a complex web of processes or thought processes that need to be followed to come up with a solution. Are we together there?
yeah, we're together.
Moving on to the third characteristic, they say time dimensions. When it comes to conventional problems, the task is completed when problem is solved. When it comes to conventional problems, but with wicked problems, there is no time solution politically determined. Which means we are saying, with conventional problem, we know that the moment we reach this step, we have come up with a solution. So we cannot be able to judge to say, so if it's going to take us 6 months, or if it's going to take us 1 week, or if it's going to take us a few hours, we would have come up with a particular solution. And then we say, so it took us 1 day to come up with a solution, or it took us 1 week to come up with a solution, or it took us 6 months to come up with a solution. But when it comes to wicked problems, because not everyone is in agreement on what the steps are, and not everyone is in agreement on what the identified problem is. Remember, I said with wicked problems, others can say, if we reach this step, we've come up with a solution. But others say, no, we need to go on to another step number 4. Others can say, no, it's not enough to go to step number 4. We need to go on to step number 5 or step number 6 or whatever it is as well. Reason being, there's no agreement on the steps that need to be followed to come up with a solution. There's no agreement on exactly what the solution is. And also, remember we said the environment that we're working in, that we operate in, which is where we are faced with wicked problems as well. Sometimes you find that by the time we come up with what you deem to be the solution, the environment would have changed as well, which means that you now need to come up with another step as well to try to maneuver and to make sure that your organization is not going to end up fitting the change in environment as well. So which means that when it comes to the time frame that's going to be used to say, now it's going to take us 2 months or take us one week or 1 day as well. There's no agreement on exactly what the time frame would be. Reason being, things are constantly changing, and there's no agreement on the steps, and there's no agreement on the solution that has been determined as well. That's why they say the solution is what? Politically determined. Because it now depends on exactly what is deemed to be the solution to suit a certain portion of the parties as well. So if a certain portion of the parties are happy with the solution, they are going to say, yes, we've come up with the solution. But remember, there's also other people who are part of this particular process as well, who are not going to be happy and saying, no, we need to get one step further, or we should have taken this particular direction as well. And you see that quite a lot when you look at the problems that we face in the world, where, for example, if you look at what is happening in the Middle East as well, others are saying, no, we should take up this particular direction, or we should go this particular direction as well. And no, the problem is this particular country, and others saying, no, the problem is this particular group of people in a particular country as well, which basically means that there is no agreement on exactly what that problem is. There's no agreement on exactly how the steps that should be taken to come up with a particular solution, and there's no agreement on exactly what the solution is. Like, for example, others are saying, no, it should be a two-state solution. Others are saying, no, we're just trying to protect our interests. No, we are the original owners of the land as well. So which basically means that you are being faced with what? Wicked problems where there's not even an agreement on exactly what the solution is. So these are typical example of what we deem to be wicked problems. Any questions? Characteristic number 4, they say.
Sorry, sir, before you continue.
Huh?
Can I understand from the definition where we're saying it's a social system problems that are ill-formulated? So when you say the wicked one are ill-formulated, can you kindly provide an example of how one can formulate it and consider to be ill formulation? Thanks.
Or you mean a formulation of what a wicked problem is?
Yes, maybe if you can provide an example to say this one we consider to be ill formulated, while the other one are normal problems that an organization can encounter. Thanks.
So the issue that we're basically saying that the issue or the dilemma that many organizations face or parties face when it comes to the issue of wicked problems is that from the get-go, there is no agreement on exactly this problem. Is it identified as a problem, or is it not basically a problem to the whole organization or to the group of people as well? Because others are saying, yes, it is a problem that needs to be solved. And others going to be saying, no, it's not necessarily a problem, it's something that we can live with as well. So it's when we talk about wicked problems, it's very difficult to define. Reason being, identification of the problem itself is a problem, is difficult. Reason being, it's subjectively determined. So because identification of the problem itself is subjectively determined, identification of the step that is to be that one is to follow to come up with a particular solution is also going to be subjectively determined. And at the same time, identification of the solution itself is going to be very difficult as well. So that's basically what we look at when you look at what are wicked problems. So I'm basically saying that even the problem itself, the identification of an agreement to say this is basically what we deem to be a problem for the particular organization is going to be very it's going to be very difficult. Reason being, we don't know exactly, there's no identification of exactly what the problem is. Like, for example, if you look at political instability, right? You look at political instability where, for example, you look at the war in Ukraine, right? Others are going to say the problem is that Russia occupied Ukraine. And others are going to say, no, the problem is the NATO countries have been advancing towards Russia. So Russia is basically trying to defend itself. So do you see that already it's a wicked problem in the sense that there is no agreement on exactly what the problem is. And because there's no agreement on exactly what the problem is, others are going to say, if Russia is the problem that is actually occupied, that is basically being aggressive towards Ukraine, so it basically means that we now need to arm Ukraine so that it's able to defend itself. But others are going to be saying, no, the war is justified. Reason being, Russia has to make sure that it protects itself from the aggressors as well, because under normal circumstances, even America will not even agree. We have a superpower having influence on a country that is going to be sharing borders with America itself. So you see that with wicked problems, there's no agreement on exactly what the problem is. And there's no agreement on exactly the process, and there's no agreement on exactly what the solution should be as well. So do you see that there's a lot of you are basically dealing with a lot of what uncertainties when it comes to dealing with exactly uncertainty regarding identification of the problem, the process that needs to be followed, the solution that is to be that one is to come up with us. Are we on the same page?
Yeah, understood.
On the next one, they look at the nature of knowledge expertise. And when it comes to conventional problems, one can say the scientific solutions by experts. And the other, when it comes to wicked problems, they say the problem definition is a function of stakeholder views and perspective. So which means if it's a conventional problem, because everyone is in agreement that this is the problem that we've identified, it means it's now easy to now use a particular model that has been formulated by scientists or that has been formulated by economists to say, this is the model that we're going to be using to come up with a solution. But when it comes to wicked problems, because there is no agreement on exactly what the problem is, the identification of the problem itself depends on from which stakeholder are you asking. Other stakeholders are going to be saying, this is the problem from this situation, and other stakeholders are going to say, no, this is the problem that we're facing from this particular situation. So which means the nature of the knowledge expertise is basically based, when it comes to wicked problems, it's basically subjective depending on which stakeholder you're going to be getting the information from. Then outcomes, they say, for conventional problems, outcomes is either true or false. It can be successful or unsuccessful. So which means everyone is in agreement that this is from this particular outcome, if we address the problem, which means that everyone will be in agreement to say, yes, we've addressed the problem, or no, we have not addressed the problem, which basically means that when it comes to conventional problems, the outcomes are basically binary. It can be, yes, it's a success, or no. But with regards to wicked problems, the unknown outcome may be better, worse, or accepted. Because there is no agreement on exactly what the solution is, it means that the outcome now is basically dependent on exactly from which stakeholder's view are you asking for the outcomes. Others are going to say, no, you've made this particular situation worse, or you've made this situation maybe acceptable, or you've made the situation better, but not necessarily what the best solution, the solution that one would have come up with as well. Yes, is there a question?
Yes, just to understand from your experience also, how would the lecturer actually put this in an exam, and then how would they actually ask us maybe to solve the problem, or how would we actually, like use this in an exam setting?
Last time it was brought in the exam, I think it was a 10-mark question. I can't remember which year it was, but the last time it was brought in the exam, the lecturer asked us to compare and contrast conventional and wicked problems. So they asked us to compare and contrast conventional and wicked problems, which means that when you're comparing and contrasting conventional and wicked problems, you are basically comparing these characteristics. Say these are the characteristics of our conventional problems, and these are the unique characteristics of what wicked problems. So if it comes in the exam, most likely you are going to be asked to compare and contrast conventional and wicked problems. Are we together?
So,
No, okay, thank you.
so does that mean that one would need to mention all these 9 characteristics and then also put in what is under conventional and then what is under wicked problems?
Yes, but remember, when you're answering questions in the exam, please not. You need to explain further You see, they give you these characteristics, like for example, where they talk about conventional problems being linear and wicked problems being complex as well. You need to explain this. You cannot just say linear, conventional problems are linear, and then say wicked problems are complex systems. You need to explain further. So you don't just copy and paste your answers, which means if you just copy and if the lecturer suspects that this one is just a copy and paste, you get 0. If you explain further to say, these are the conventional problems, and even giving examples as well of what conventional problems is, or situations where there's conventional problems and situations where there's wicked problems as well, it makes it easier to show. Because remember, when it comes to honors modules, the idea is you need to demonstrate understanding of what application of your understanding as well. Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
Yes,
Can
sir.
we move on? Mhm.
Can I just put an analogy somewhere here? I think I have
Mhm.
an understanding of the risk, and I'd like to give a practical example. Uh, can we use a bearing bank, for example, as an organization that was faced with a wicked problem? Because the bank did collapse, right? And we can see that as a problem. But what was the cause of the problem? There are different views. Others say that the auditors failed in their mission. Others say the Bank of England was supposed to board of executives, one of the characteristics of wicked problem. Am I on the right path?
Not necessarily. Reason being, remember, one of the issues that Barings Bank was facing is when you look at the how Nick Leeson was operating, he was finding himself in the front office and finding himself in the back office as well. Hence, he was able to manipulate the system, isn't it? So we cannot say it's a wicked problem in the sense that there is an agreement to say the problem here is basically Nick Leeson is able to operate from in the front office and at the same time and in the back office, which means that everyone basically, when it comes to the finding the solution there, everyone would be in agreement to say we cannot have someone operating in the front office and both in the back office. That's why you see that, especially when it comes to investment banks, they basically try to, when you compare the investment banks to the commercial banks for the same entities, well, they try to create what they call a Chinese wall, where there has to be separation of functions. And when it comes to the front office and the back office as well, there has to be a Chinese wall where the front office is not necessarily going to be working hand in hand with the back office at the same time as well. So I wouldn't say when it comes to the issue of Barings Bank, they were facing wicked problems, because when you look at identification of remember, it was not just one problem that they were facing. You now have to look at the list of problems that Barings Bank faced. And from those list of problems, would everyone be in agreement to say, yes, this is the problem that they faced? And I'm sure that from the issues that they faced, everyone would be in agreement and say, this is the issue that we faced, and this is how we're going to be able to come up with a solution. So I wouldn't say Barings Bank, when it comes to the issue of nucleus and the way faced with wicked problems, because they would be in agreement on the different list of identified problems, and there is an agreement on exactly what the solutions would be as well to address these problems. Are we together? Any questions before we move on to the next point? Now, when it comes to problem approach, for conventional problems, the scientific and knowledge protocols that needs to be followed, which means when it comes to dealing with knowledge with conventional problems, we're basically saying that there is already a process that one needs to follow in dealing with these conventional problems. So there's already an agreement to say, if we face this particular problem, these are the steps that we need to make sure that we follow to ensure that we address the different problems. But when it comes to wicked problems, the solutions are judgmental, depending on the stakeholder views. Mainly because we're not in agreement on exactly what the problem is and what the steps should be followed to actually come up with that particular solution as well. It basically means that there is also no agreement on exactly what the solution would be as well. So it's basically dependent or subjective on from whose stakeholder's view you are going to be assessing it from. The next one is problem characteristic. And yes, they say, when it comes to problem characteristic, there is basically loose coupling when it comes to problem characteristics, in the sense that we have seen that these the characteristics of the problem are basically saying that there is a step by step that one needs to follow when it comes to coming up with a particular solution, which basically means that we already know that from step number one needs to go to step number 2, then step number 3, and then step number 4 to come up with a solution. So which means that because we know that to come up with a solution, one needs to go to step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and step number 4. We're basically saying that there's loose coupling in the sense that the nodes are going to basically connected, and these nodes are basically, you already know that this node is going to be connecting to node number 2, then node number 2 connects to node number 3, then node number 3 connects to node number 4 as well. So that's basically what they deem to be loose coupling. Then with tight coupling, we're basically saying that there is different interconnected parts when it comes to tight coupling, which basically means that this is where, for example, there are different interconnected parts, which means that these different interconnected parts, they are basically closely connected to each other. And for them to function, they have to be linked to each other, which means that one cannot work without the other one. So which means that because one cannot work without the other one as well, it basically means that this is where which basically means that if one node is malfunctioning, it basically means that the whole system basically comes down, and there's not going to be a solution that one can be able to come up with. So that's what mean when you look at what tight coupling, which means that the different nodes in the system are closely connected to each other, and if one fails, the whole system basically fails to operate. Characteristic number 8, we look at solutions characteristic, and here we look at the cause and effect analysis. So there's a cause and effect analysis when it comes to conventional problems, but when it comes to wicked problems, there's multiple feedback analysis. So which means when it comes to conventional problems, we already know that this is going to affect us to come up with step number 2, and this will affect us to come number 3, step number 4. So the cause and effect is easily understood. But when it comes to wicked problems, because there are so many interconnected parts there, the cause and effect is not easily understood, mainly because we're dealing with so many interconnected parts. And because we're dealing with so many interconnected parts there, there's going to be multiple feedback, because there's going to be feedback to say, no, this should be the solution, or this should be the solution, or this should be. So there's going to be multiple feedback analysis when it comes to coming up with a solution. Then characteristic number 9, we look at the value system. And with conventional problem, there's a shared values of outcomes. So which means because everyone is in agreement on exactly what the problem is, everyone's going to be in agreement on exactly what the outcome is. Is it a success, or is it a failure? Is it address the problem, or is it not address the problem? Everyone would be in agreement. But when it comes to the value system of wicked problems, they say the values are in dispute or in conflict, because not everyone is in agreement on exactly what the problem is. Not everyone is going to be in agreement on exactly what the solution is as well. Hence, we say the value system is in dispute or in conflict. Are we on the same page? Any questions? So here they say,
Sorry, just a question.
Mhm.
So in terms of those disputes, is there a method how they are resolved from a wicked problem perspective, or it's not in the guide?
resolving wicked problems is going to be very subjective. You are going to make certain people happy, and you're going to make certain people not happy. Reason being, not everyone is going to be in agreement on exactly what the solution is. So it basically means that if you're going to be solving wicked problems, most likely the question would be, which people am I going to try to make happy? And which people am I going to have a situation where they are going to be happy with the solution? Because not everyone is going to be happy with the identified solution as well. Are we together?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Yes, Rhinus, I also
Yeah.
want to get clarity insofar as this table is concerned, because now my observation is that you look at the 9 characteristics, right? That is of conventional as well as wicked. Now, from what I can make out, wicked seem to be sort of not good as compared to conventional. In that, for me, I think it's speculative, it's inferential, it's subjective, and all of that, given the comparison that we see between the two. So what I want to understand is that now from an enterprise risk management perspective, are we supposed perhaps to take note or perhaps to avoid, or what is expected of us perhaps to know insofar as these two are concerned? Like I indicated, my analysis, perhaps you can shed more light on that score, is that conventional seem to be better than wicked. For example, one can go into what has been set out here. For example, we'll say shared values, and then the values are in dispute, number 9. Outcome is either true or false, which is definite. And then on the other side, wicked is unknown outcome and all of that. Number 4, for example, scientific solution by experts, and then this one, problem definition is functional stakeholder and all of that. So I'm not so sure as to perhaps, in light of what I'm trying to establish, what is perhaps the position insofar as this one is concerned. Thank you.
Now, when it comes to from a risk management perspective, we're basically saying in the business environment that you're going to be operating in, don't expect that every problem that you're going to be facing is going to be a conventional problem where we are going to be able to come up with a particular solution which basically satisfies everyone in the environment that we're going to be operating in. Also expect that there are certain, because of globalization, there are certain solutions that are going to be coming up with where we are not going to be necessarily going to be able to come up with the solutions, or from a risk management perspective, where we are having solutions that everyone is going to be in agreement with as well. So which basically means that the idea is we are trying to prepare risk managers for the and also the organizations as well to understand that there are certain solutions, or there are certain problems that we might end up identifying or coming up, or situations which we are going to coming up across that are going to come across, and these situations, they are going to be facing wicked problems, because remember, because of globalization, we are now having, if we're going to be introducing a particular product as well, you will see that not everyone is going to be happy with that particular product. So which means that, well, it basically means that we are going to be faced with a wicked problem, mainly because not everyone is going to be happy with this particular problem in what it's going to be addressing in the environment that we're going to be operating in. Because other people are going to be saying, this product is not necessarily the right product for us to be able to identify. We are saying that this is the problem that we need to address with this particular product. But other people are saying, no, this is not the product that we are identifying. We have other issues that we need to be able to identify as well, which basically means that because because of different value systems in the environment that businesses are going to be operating in as well, expect that certain solutions that you're going to be coming up with are not necessarily going to be solutions that everyone is going to be in agreement with, especially when you look at the globalization in the environment that what we're going to be operating in as well. So being prepared to say, in the environment that the organization is going to be operating, it's not every problem that we're going to be dealing with that is going to be a conventional problem. There are so many factors that are going to be influencing the environment that we're going to be operating in, which means that not everyone is going to be in agreement on the problems, and not everyone.
You on mute, Reynolds.
Yeah. All right. On the last section, they say, so individuals address conventional problems daily, often informed by habits, past experience, protocols, and routines. For example, a medical doctor undertaking a patient diagnosis combines a stock of knowledge from memory, a colleague's advice, and certain tools as the basis to prescribe medical treatment to find acceptable solutions. Then they also go on to say, managers, on the contrary, apply software tools, judgment, and focus to stock shelves with replenished inventory based on past, current, and expected sales. So strategies and heuristics or rules of thumb which allow a decision maker to search for solutions to conventional problems may become inappropriate to address wicked problems as well. Now, when you look at the strategic nature of wicked problems, they say, in today's complex world, tools and strategies such as forecasting, SWOT analysis, competitive forces, life cycle models, and portfolio and scenario analysis stem from assumptions, premises, and theories drawn mainly from microeconomics. Unfortunately, real-world social systems display novelty and disruptive change, and social dynamics are not governed by stable, linear, causal mechanisms. So they also go on to say, Akoff contended that there are three categories of wicked problems: puzzles with well-defined, which are well-defined with optimal solutions; problems with well-defined but no single solution; and messes which are hard to formulate. So traditional approaches using bureaucratic systems fail to address wicked problems because their uncertainty characteristics require collaboration with that enhances intellectual knowledge diffusion, joint learning, and understanding how one can be a symptom of a related problem. So effective collaboration demands a shared consensus on the problem definition, which fosters commitment of alternative solutions and understanding of feedback mechanisms and mean-ends relationship. So wicked problems require a decision process of structuring and restructuring in which solutions emerge only gradually through a process of defining external and internal constraints. So how one defines the problem affects the attempts to solve it. So conventional models ignore the extremely complex causal relations and feedback mechanisms. So they apply to decision problems of relative stability, linearity, simple causal mechanisms in the environment, and the classical hierarchical information flows as well. So they're also going to say, so similarly, wicked problems are rarely addressed with the core MBA curriculum, as depicted in Figure 2. Business strategies textbooks, case studies, models, and tools fostered by consulting firms and their in-house journals often ignore wicked problems. Even worse, they address wicked problems with solutions that apply only to problems with well-defined probabilistic solutions. So models of traditional problem-solving, hierarchical decision-making fail to understand the complicated interdependence of wicked problems. So strategic misalignments arise when organizations use a decision-making system to design designed to address environmental uncertainties that assume linear models with limited cognitive complexities and computational deliberation as well. So here they say, so the second is an anchor bias where evidence is quickly accepted that supports existing assumptions while contrary opinions are downplayed or rejected. So in this way, hostility towards critics is heightened in the hierarchy, especially if decision makers fail to produce real solutions as a result of dire unintended consequences occurring as well. So here they also go on to say, when you look at managing problem-solving models with strategic alignment, they say, understanding the nature of wicked problems and appreciating approaches to address them represent a strategic design challenge. Past experience and historical precedents may prejudge appropriate views of success, or even the people to address the issues. So clearly, deviations from the norm defy conventions of what is appropriate. So misalignment of managers' sense making, or in other words, the vital managerial capacity to recognize, understand, and interpret inherent complexity in the environment can lead to costly and possibly catastrophic errors as well. And then they give us figure 3. We don't really need to worry much about figure 3. So they also go on to say, the risk of strategic misalignment based on executive attention, focusing on not only to the wrong issues, but with a closed mindset to the nature of wicked problems, may seem obvious. So executive behavior reflects coalition politics that allows senior managers to mold firm identity, competencies, and problem attention by controlling communication tools, issue agendas, luxury goods, and promotion positions that preserve power and status. So these transformations change the nature of corporate risk and risk assessment. So the intensity of knowledge is the design and engineering of products and services. Smartphones, hybrid vehicles, nuclear power plants, and aerospace products illustrate new demands of risk management because their design features increased risk of failure with potentially catastrophic consequences. So Charles Perrow, studying high-risk organizations such as nuclear power plants, addresses 2 dimensions of wicked problems. The first is the degree of interactive complexity with the potential of deeply rooted ignorance about how variables interact. It can be foreseen, understood, or managed. So the second, tight coupling, the design system of tight procedural sequential flows of each subsystem, where the failure of one with a little buffering or redundancy can result in catastrophic failure of the entire system. So that's basically what you look at when you look at what wicked problems. Then on the next paragraph, they also say variability coordination is, however, not as a trivial activity and needs a high level of training, collaborative decision making, long-term perspective, but if successful, becomes a very difficult to replicate as well because the environment would have changed. So in conclusion on this article, they say, conventional strategy management models presume reasonable stability in the task environment, in the nature of the feedback mechanism, and the organizational design features that weaken the interaction and direct participation of activities of those decision makers who make strategic choices and those who are removed in time and space from direct organizational activities. So wicked problem solving removes a culture of denial, quick adaptation to simple failure, and short-term repairs to communications feedback. So wicked problem solving is by temperament and time horizon, a multi-layered, multitask organizational challenge, and it requires fundamentally different mindsets to design and performance systems for senior executives. So organizational pathologies rest in executive action, pursuit of goals and objectives with this false sense of causation, feedback filters that aggregate good news and restrict bad news and action that given only token measures to correct faulty design decisions and faulty decision processes, including more emphasis on vertical channels than what horizontal task interdependencies as well. So that's basically what we look at when you look at our wicked problems. So the main thing that you need to make sure that you take note from this particular article when it comes to preparation of the exam is you need to be able to understand and compare and contrast what we mean by wicked problems and what we mean by what? By conventional problems. So typically, the question that you should expect in the exam is basically being able to identify and distinguish the characteristics that makes makes it different when it comes to the comparison between wicked problems and conventional problems as well. So are there any questions when it comes to study unit 2.1? Any questions? All right, please note that in the next class, we're going to look at Unit 2.2, and we are still continuing with enterprise risk management. And the idea is, we're basically saying the risk management function has to work hand in hand with other departments within the organization, so that way the organization is going to be agile enough to keep up with the changes or the ever-changing environment in which the organization is going to be working in, so that they are able to create a competitive advantage, with the goal being to maximize shareholders' wealth. All right, so please note that our next class is going to be next week, because remember, because there was late registration, we were not able to start in March. And because of that, the month of April, we are going to be having 3 classes running sequentially as well, to try to make up for us not being able to start in March as well. So please note that our next class is going to be next week, and we're going to be looking at Unit 2.2 going onwards. Please take note that those who missed the first class, we are going to give you a link for you to be able to watch the video going through the first class as well, where we look at study Unit 1.1 to 1.5. So please take note that the videos are going to be made available, and you're going to be able to catch up on that as well. And please note as well that when it comes to assignment 1 is a housekeeping assignment. So although it's a housekeeping assignment, the questions that you face there, it's usually those questions that ask you to say, how many topics do you find in Rsk4803? How do you submit your assignments? Or for example, those are the typical questions, which are basically housekeeping type of questions as well. So I'll try to encourage you to have a look at those questions, although during the week next week, we are going to share a template where you're able to find the different questions for assignment for assignment 1 for Rsk4803 as well. So we are going to be able to share the template for assignment 1, but please have a look at it, because assignment 1, it's a housekeeping assignment. Although from assignment 2 onwards, I know that I will be sharing those assignments with you, because it's now going to be based on the different study units. All right, if there are no questions, enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Reynolds.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm so sorry to cut you off.
Yes.
At the beginning of the class, you mentioned that we must not focus too much on the case studies, but I've noticed that this course is filled with various articles, and some do have case studies. Do you have specific articles or units whereby the information should be analyzed thoroughly?
It's just Unit 1.1 to 1.4 that I said don't spend too much time on it. But remember, please go through the video where I go through Unit 1.1 to 1.4. Please go to the video. That's where I explain it in more detail as well. It's just Unit 1.1 to 1.4 where I said those study units go through and have a broad understanding of the case, of the case study, but don't try to go through too much detail on it. Have a broad understanding, so that from there you can now be able to use it as an example when you're addressing certain questions in the exam, but not necessarily that you have to understand the intricacies of these case studies. Have a broader view of understanding, but not necessarily understanding it in detail. Yes. Is there another question? Is there another question?
Yes,
How are
yes.
we gonna be? How are we gonna hear the process of registration?
Please contact your administrator, the one that that was contacting you for you to join the group. They will be able to give you that information as well. Just contact them on WhatsApp.
All right.
All right. Yes, is there another question?
Yes. I want to check here how to access the recording of this lecture.
For those who joined us today, we are going to give you the video where you are able to, basically, we have an orientation video where when you go to that particular video, it gives you an understanding of exactly what to expect during the year, how to access your material, and where to get your material as well. So you will be able to. But in that video, we demonstrate everything.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Okay. All right. I have to rush for my next class. If there's any other questions as well, we will be able to address them via WhatsApp through the different WhatsApp admin as well.